starting to get a little drier here. We haven't had rain in a couple of days, so a lot of the fungi that were out a couple of days ago are now starting to dry up. But that's not, like I said, not surprising. They are only present for a few days typically. So one of the things you'll notice in some of these parks, now this one doesn't have as much as some, but there's a lot of wild hog activity, and that can also affect, the fungi you'll find, because the hogs will actually go after the mushrooms, but it also causes a lot of disturbance and things in the soil. And there's some of that in here, in places where the soil's been all disturbed and torn up, and there are places where you'll see that here. Now that path cuts off to the south, but we'll continue this way here. So here we've got what I believe to be what's called a bolete. Nope, I was mistaken. Looked at the top and it's not. This is actually what's called a Lactarius species. So you see the little white milk-like droplets on it. So Lactarius, you can probably imagine from the name, lactose, meaning, coming from meaning milk-like. They produce this milky sort of exudate, and so you can definitely see that on this one here. There's actually several species of these in our area. One of them is very beautiful. It's got sort of a bluish color to it, Lactarius indigo, and if we see one, I'll show you. Usually those are more present or earlier in the summer. You can see the white droplets on this one. It's really cool. Some of these are edible too, by the way. Some of the Lactarius species. Looks like this might be another of the same one that we just saw. Now I'm going to show you in a moment another fungus that one of my other graduate students is working on. That is a new pathogen to our area, and one that we're concerned about for trees. If I can find a branch low enough, I'll show it to you. That's affecting some different species in the birch family. It's affecting both Carpinus and Austraea, so hornbeam and hop hornbeam. These are two native species in the birch family. So these are two kind of smaller understory tree species, but we've found this new, what's called a rust fungus, that's causing defoliation. So these are both, well, these are Carpinus, so these are eastern hornbeam, sometimes called blue beech. And so we've recently discovered a foliar pathogen. It's called a rust, and rust fungi are very important pathogens, or pathogenic fungi that globally are, very, very important on crops and all sorts of things. But the one that we found a couple of years ago and are working on, we believe it to be from some other part of the world, probably Europe, but again, that phylogenetic work is really important. But when you find a new species and there's not a lot of information on the group of fungi you're working on, it's hard to figure that out 100%. But anyway, this fungus, it produces little orange, little tiny, very, very, very small orange spores on the surface of the leaves, and then it causes the leaves to defoliate, and you can see all the leaves are missing from these twigs. And the effect of that is, of course, it stresses out the trees and it weakens the trees, and it causes decline. And we're very concerned about this because this is an important native tree. And so you get these little spots on the leaves like this, and then the leaves drop off. I don't know on the camera if I can even get the rust very well, because it's so small, and it seems like this time of the year it doesn't show up as well, because honestly, so many of them have defoliated at this point. So there's not a lot of new infections. As it gets hot, they kind of start to drop off. I can post some pictures, some really good pictures actually on the class website. But here's both hosts actually side by side. So that's Carpinus and this is Australia, which is hophorn beam. But you can kind of see those little orange spots on the leaves, and again you can see how there's a bunch where there should be leaves, the leaves are gone. So the effect is again significant. Here's some right here on this leaf, right there. It's not showing up as good as I'd like on the camera, but anyway, so that I wanted to show you that. And then also here's another interesting little fungus. Look at this purple. So you can see how they've been nibbled on. You see how the edges on the edges of that little mushroom. So clearly wildlife come along and eat these mushrooms. I mean, squirrels and all kinds of wildlife will eat these mushrooms. They're very, very important for wildlife. Some species that we can't eat because of those toxins I mentioned, wildlife are able to eat them and have no problem with them, which is pretty interesting. Things like Amanita, the death angel, the white one that's really toxic to us, certain wildlife are able to eat them and have no problem at all. But look how beautiful this one is. But you can see looks like there's been probably a couple of beetles eating it. You can see the holes in it. So anyway, so let's continue on up the path and see what we can see. Wanted to see if we could find some chicken of the woods, because there are definitely still some of those out, although we're getting a little bit late in the season for them. So chicken of the woods, like Claudia mentioned, Lactarius sulphureus, it's a wood decay fungus, and it's one you're going to find on the stems of oak trees. So that's one that's really kind of a choice edible. And another one is called lion's mane. And lion's mane is really a good, delicious edible, and is sometimes you'll even find that one in grocery stores, and sometimes in I've even found it in some of the restaurants in Gainesville occasionally being offered, with like pasta and things like that. So here's another wood decay fungus, and you can see the obvious effect of it. Of course, once it loses strength, the stem breaks, falls, and the decay process continues, of course. No big surprise there. So I'm sure some of you are dying to know about psychedelic mushrooms, right? Or maybe some of you are experts on them already, I don't know. But I always have students that want to know about it or ask about them. And there is certainly a lot of interest in them, and the interest is growing because of, obviously they've been important for thousands of years in certain cultures, but Psilocybe cubensis is a native mushroom to this region. It's very common and abundant, and it occurs primarily where you have animal dung, particularly from cattle and other livestock. So people are often surprised, if they have property where those animals occur, that they will have hundreds, if not thousands, of Psilocybe cubensis present. But those mushrooms are very, very common. Those mushrooms produce psilocybin and then a closely related compound that are basically those alkaloids I mentioned before. Those compounds that our body has a difficult time dealing with. But in this case, those compounds aren't necessarily toxic. They just our body doesn't break them down completely, and they obviously lead to certainly changes in our brain, and then and there's been obviously a lot of interest in them because of that. And so there is a lot of interest lately in in them because there's in the medical community, because people believe that they can treat certain disorders, particularly depression and anxiety and things like that. And so there's been certainly legalization efforts, and some have been successful in certain places. There are some very interesting accounts of the early work on them. Some of the early work that was done at Harvard and other places like that, if you're interested in some of that kind of stuff. I would just say that right now probably there's more scientific work being done on them and medical work being done than probably any other time in history. And there's a program at Johns Hopkins that's focused on them, and so it's pretty fascinating stuff. And for a lot of people, they claim that their experiences using them, and in the right way is a life-changing experience, or is the most important thing that they ever did in their lives. So it's pretty interesting. Of course, they are illegal, to possess and to grow and things like that. But like I said, they're abundant and common, and especially here. And so, there are definitely debates about things like traditional medicine and those types of things. And I think it's a good thing that this is being debated. I think it's a good thing that people are discussing these things more openly than they were in the past, at least. And but like I said about all fungi, I mean, anyone seeking out fungi for any kind of consumption, you need to be very careful and educated about them, and knowing what you're doing, and never collect a fungus for any kind of consumption without knowing whether it's something that is what you think it is, and then B, that that you're doing something that's illegal or not. And I don't condone doing anything illegal. I'm not doing that here. And then but I just thought I would mention a little bit about them, just because I know people are always asking, and I do find them fascinating. And what is being done with psilocybe and things is pretty fascinating. And I do think that there's a very fascinating story from one of my colleagues who's worked with psilocybe and an insect, actually, and how well, not psilocybe, but psilocybin, that's produced by another fungus, and how this fungus manipulates the behavior of cicadas, and basically causes the cicadas to changes their behavior completely to benefit the fungus. And so actually I'll post that for you guys to read. It's pretty fascinating stuff. So the fungi can manipulate their environment in a lot of ways, through their chemistry, and that again is also fascinating. And there's also even theories out there about psilocybe that way, in terms of that, because it grows on animal dung, that that perhaps that was sort of an evolutionary adaptation, and things like that. And anyway, there's lots of interesting theories out there about that. So anyway, there's some more mushrooms here in this little wet area. Again, they're going to grow where conditions are good for them, and there's some really great trees here. This is a massive Quercus virginiana, a big live oak, and growing in this little wet area. You can see there's some more mushrooms popping in here. Here's another one here. See, and but there's some really nice specimens over there. You can see there's a big, massive laurel oak. That's a Quercus laurifolia, and so maybe we can walk over that way and see what else we can find in here. Now, this little species is really common. I think this is a russula, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, these are really common in this time of the year, and they're beautiful. They're just like such pretty little ones with sort of a pink flush on the stalk. And I'll just put it back, replant it. Whoops, because it's not going to work. Anyway, lots of those here. And but again, the variation that you'll see really depends on the type of ecology, where you're at. Because like on my property, there's a lot of species that I have that I'm not seeing here. And